hope you're having as relatively decent a day as we are here in southeastern Michigan. At least it's above sleet and freezing rain where we've been the last few days, which is not as much fun as it was. Well, it never is that much fun. But anyway, my name is Ken Varnum, and I'm very excited to be speaking with you today about some of the lessons and work that we did in the production of the book Beyond Reality, Expanding Your Library's Services to the Virtual. I'm going to walk through an overview of some of the themes, and then at the end, we will have some time for questions or discussion, which I will do my best to facilitate. So first, let me just offer a little bit about myself. I'm currently working as the Senior Program Manager for Discovery, Delivery, and Library Analytics at the University of Michigan Library. And that is sort of a catch-all job that involves program and project management around the library's discovery interfaces, our document delivery requesting tools, and some data collection and analysis around what we can learn about users through the patterns of their work and how to integrate that with other activities that are happening across the University of Michigan campus. I've been at Michigan now for I guess a baker's dozen of years now, about 13. And I've also had positions at much smaller academic libraries, a corporate library, and a special library. So I'm much more recently familiar with the large-scale academic world, but I certainly have poked around some other kinds of libraries as well. My professional and kind of vocational hobby, I guess you'd say, is thinking and writing and compiling information about emerging technologies. I've had the luck to be able to put together a handful of books, the most recent of which is Beyond Reality, about which I'll be speaking more. I'm also the editor of LIDA's Information Technology and Libraries, a peer-reviewed open access technology journal that has been around for now more than 50 years, and I've been at the head of it now for the past 3. So my interest in augmented and virtual reality really kind of came out of, it was a topic that I didn't know much about when I started. It was a topic that was really new to me. I had dabbled in it as a consumer, but I hadn't really done much about it. And as I was working on actually the other book that happened to come out last year, the New Top Technologies Every Librarian Needs to Know, I was struck by how many of the chapter contributors who proposed chapters for that work, which was a much broader landscape kind of publication across all areas of technologies in the libraries, that there was a huge amount of interest and experimentation across public and academic libraries in augmented and virtual reality. And that really piqued my interest, and I ended up, after talking with my editors in ALA Editions, putting together and working with a number of authors to create this second book. So this book it's a series of case studies, about a dozen chapters, about different flavors of reality in the library, all of them technologically enhanced, along with a kind of wrapping up chapter that talks about some legal considerations, at least from an American US perspective. What I want to do today is go over some definitions, make sure that when the terms that I've used, like augmented, virtual, mixed reality, we all understand what they mean. They can mean a lot of different things. And then I'm going to walk through some case studies of what libraries are doing today using these technologies, starting with some very basic and then moving up into some much more complicated or advanced or integrated systems and workflows. I'll talk a little bit about things that I think are, and the authors who contributed chapters to the book think are coming on the horizon. And then what things that we ought to be keeping in mind as information professionals, as librarians, as we consider moving into this space or continuing work that we're already doing in this space. So first, some definitions. Start with reality, and that's the thing that we're all trying hard to ignore right now. But it's the real world services, the tools, the items, the interactions, the physical, tangible things that are in the real world that we as species, as living beings, have only until the last few years have ever had anything else to contrast that with. As technology has grown and expanded, we have moved into and to need vocabulary to describe things that are beyond reality, in a sense. The first one is augmented reality, which is enhancing what you actually see, what you perceive through your natural born senses, to overlay information, overlay digital objects onto an image, generally speaking, that you're viewing through a device. Often that's through a smartphone camera, maybe it's through your computer, maybe it's through some special eyeglasses. Google Glass was an attempt at that. But you are still mostly perceiving the real world, but you are also getting information brought in from other sources at the same time. Common, or at least things that you may have seen in this space, are heads-up displays, either in high-end automobiles or perhaps in aircraft, where information about the road ahead, about driving directions, about things that are also in the air flying near you, are projected onto the windscreen or the glass in front of you. So they are right there in your line of sight while you're interacting with the real world. I'm sure many of us either have played, or have young relatives who play Pokemon Go or other such games, which is really putting a layer of fun stuff into the real world around you. You're moving around the real world, things happen to you in the game that are tied to your physical location. Google Translate is another great example of this. And is, if you've had occasion to use it while traveling in a place where you may not speak the language, simply holding up the Google Translate, which uses your smartphone's camera, to a sign in a language you don't read, and it rewrites the sign in your preferred language. All of these are examples of augmenting the world around us, changing it to make it work, but you're still very much operating in the real world. Virtual reality takes that to the extreme in the definitions that we're using, which is a wholly artificial environment that supplants or completely replaces your experience of the world. Right now, it's most often conducted wearing some large, bulky headset, and perhaps earphones, so that you have the sights and sounds of the world that is being generated by a computer in front of your eyes and giving you the auditory sense of where you are. You hear everything that you experience in that way is generated by the computer. There are commercial software tools, Oculus Rift, Google Cardboard, many other commercially available headsets and tools live in this space. Ready Player One's main theme is this whole virtual reality that replaces the real reality, which is not quite as pleasant in that envisioning. The Star Trek holodeck is sort of taking this to the far off extreme, where the world is built around you in 3 dimensions with real physical feel as you operate in it. We are nowhere near there, for better or worse. And then a term that you hear quite a lot is mixed reality, which is the continuum from things that are just slightly augmented all the way up to almost completely virtual. And mixed reality really encompasses what you and I are likely to see, I would say, except maybe for the very youngest of us in this class, in this webinar, in our world. I don't see the Star Trek holodeck ever coming to pass in my lifetime, as sad as that makes me. So it's really this continuum. You have kind of real reality on the left of this continuum, moving through augmented reality up to completely virtual reality. And the real reality we have, completely virtual reality we don't. And again, most of what we experience and will be talking about and have and will be developed in the coming years will be somewhere along this broad continuum. So I want to turn now to some examples of ways that libraries have found to integrate these tools into their programming, into the way they conduct their business, offer services to their patrons. And the first is actually a home tool. It's a home thing that you can play with, which is called it's coloring books. That you can get, and along with an app for your relatively recent smartphone, anything that can probably iPhone SE or newer, the original SE, or Android devices. But in this, you combine the smartphone app or an iPad or a tablet app for Android devices with coloring books and pages, and the person can go ahead and color the coloring book however they like, and then using the app on a mobile device of one kind or another, can see that character come off the page and then do something through the phone's camera on the phone's screen, interact with the world in some way. So in this example of a still taken here, the person has colored in the soccer player and used the phone, and then a screen capture from the tablet shows that soccer player standing up and kicking the ball into a net that has been supplied by the augmented reality. Again, this is very basic and very simple, but it's a way to both experiment with the technologies, introduce them to a young audience, or perhaps audiences that are just curious about augmented or virtual reality, regardless of their age, and don't quite know what it's all about. It's a way to open the door to this. This is something that it's out there. Quiver sells the books online. You can get the papers and print them out yourself, download the coloring books, and download the app. I think many of us are also familiar with something that my own kids are right now spending a vast amount of time in, which is Minecraft. Minecraft, for those of you who don't know, is a simple interactive game / programming experience where on a computer, on a smartphone, on an Xbox or PlayStation, you can interact with other people through avatars, build worlds, harvest ore, make your house, do all sorts of things, fight battles, of course, because kids. But one of the things that's really quite interesting about Minecraft is that it is really just a platform for building things, and lots of stuff. There are lots of games that have been built around it that lots of people use. But combined with the Microsoft HoloLens VR goggles, you can actually take the world that you have constructed, perhaps the building you have built, and export that file and import it into your HoloLens software, and see a three-dimensional model in the real world that you can then interact with. You can turn it, you can see if it looks right from a distance or from above, you can change the way it works, and really get an entree. So this would be a great way to introduce perhaps older middle school, high school, college age students or adults to what virtual reality can do, particularly for those who are already spending a lot of their time living in traditional two-dimensional reality worlds, such as Minecraft, and be able to expand that and get a sense of what the object they have constructed looks like in three-dimensional space. And we're going to come back to this this idea a little bit later when we talk about 3D printing. So another place that libraries are seeing the merging of another major trend of makerspaces and 3D labs into virtual reality is in the way that a lot of libraries are offering makerspaces, where you can go in and on a 2D screen, a regular traditional computer screen, you can design objects to be printed on a 3D printer. And there are lots of places where you can go and obtain a model of something to print, whether it's a small toy or perhaps a plastic fastener to repair your car. There are lots of things that you can download pre-printed designs, install them, and get them printed on your home 3D printer or in a library 3D printer. But one of the real powers of 3D printing and design is that you can, of course, construct your own images. You can use design software to build a 3D model on the screen, and then print it out and have the real thing in your hand. So that is really, that's a fantastic and very engaging tool and task for many people to explore, inventing something in their head, rendering it on the screen, and having it then at the end of the day as a 3D printed object. But one of the challenges is that your 3D printer can only print things that can actually exist in the real world. You can design a tesseract on the screen, but it is remarkably difficult to actually print a 4D object in 3 dimensions. You can also have shapes that you've designed where there is a slight misalignment between 2 edges, where one is supposed to support the other, but in fact it doesn't. And some of these problems are very, very difficult to see on the screen, and are much easier to see when modeled in 3D with the 3D goggles. So an example of this is from the University of Rhode Island, where they have a makerspace and 3D design lab where you can build your shape and you can export it then into your 3D viewer, into your Oculus Rift or your HoloLens or whatever other virtual reality goggles you're using, and then actually interact with that shape. You can turn it in space, you can rotate it, you can actually look at it to say, gee, does this actually work? In the slide that you're seeing, you might have accidentally offset the top of it by just enough pixels or just enough object space that it isn't actually printable. You may have a gap between layers where something looks like it's actually attached in one smooth piece, one smooth object. But from the 3D printer's perspective, as it's layering plastic, layering the printer medium from the bottom to the top, you may actually get to a point where there's a gap, a space, and that's not intended, and it won't print. Depending on the software you're using, you may not find that out until your object is half printed or more than that. And so this is a way to see what you're going to get before you actually get it. And in terms of community college or advanced public library or academic spaces where the 3D modeling is being used to build real world objects, being able to combine what is on the screen with what can be manipulated through virtual reality is a very powerful tool. And again, makes this much, much more useful even for the casual user. Reduces the frustration of designing things that you can't actually do, you can't actually produce. So 3D labs, 3D printing labs, those are not necessarily every library. They are expensive. There are lots of ways to provide the virtual reality experience to your patron base without having to have complex makerspaces or having that technology in your library. I'm not sure. Does this Zoom session have the show of hands features set up? I'm just wondering how many of our audience have used Google Cardboard or the equivalent. Is there a way to indicate that? Yeah, now I have to figure out as the presenter how I actually see the tallies. I'm seeing a lot of people are raising their hands, but unfortunately I don't see, where's my presenter list? So many of you have experienced this. Google Cardboard or similar kind of things. Thank you, Cindy and Jacqueline. I did this on a whim and I didn't plan ahead for this, so next time I'll be readier. It's basically just a cardboard holder for a smartphone. And with software loaded onto the smartphone through the App Store or Google Play, it gives you, in essence, a stereoscopic view. So the headpiece, the holder, is very much like a ViewMaster. Has two eyepieces, two lenses, and then your smartphone displays two slightly offset images on it. And when you hold it up to your head and when you're listening to the audio that's provided over your smartphone, you can go visit someplace, take a tour. You can, somebody has recorded it, you're following their path. They generally don't have a lot of choice. It's not a choose your own adventure or a just explore this created world on your own. But there's a tremendous amount of content out there. New York Times has this whole series of virtual reality videos that they have gone and recorded visits to places. They have one that I just find absolutely stunning, which puts you on the surface of Pluto from the New Horizons spacecraft photographs. They've reimagined that and mapped those images into a tour on the surface. And so you can go someplace and experience it. Some, the camera that took the original image is stationary and takes a 360-degree image all around you, top, bottom, and all around a panorama. And when you see a room full of people, or just watching your friend or partner do that, you stand there, you've got your headphones on, you've got the Google Cardboard on in your face, and as you move your whole body around, up and down, what you see is moving with you because the camera senses how your body is moving. There are other versions that are more immersive, where the camera is itself on a moving object, and you can sit still and experience a roller coaster or a flight or a walk down a hallway, or whatever it is that the person who created the video is trying to share with you. I am one of the minority of people who is particularly sensitive to motion sickness and 3D experiences. And so I personally do not enjoy those as much as many people do. But it is it makes me queasy sitting in a chair watching the motion happen. I'm also someone who can't play Mario Kart on a TV for extended periods of time, as I immerse myself so deeply in the game that I'm being beaten at that I get queasy. So this is a concern that we'll talk about down the road. But there is actually a small amount of just, it is fascinating to watch a room full of people who are using these devices, either kind of walking around, hopefully not bumping into each other, but experiencing the world and exploring and moving around in it. And each of them has their own experience at the same time. And it's really, really very, very exciting. So, and it can be very amusing. And, at the time that we're allowed to have people in the same room again, date for some office, some historical event, or just pictures of what downtown used to look like in the 1940s, the 1920s, the 1960s. It really gives you a chance to kind of embed your library in the community and not just have hope that the community thinks that, oh, my library has stuff that's relevant to put there. LAR is just one of these tools. There are a number. There are some open source standards for tagging images and collections where you can make them available. One of the beauties of this is that when, once you have made your content available with geotags for a specific location, the LAR app tells you, it knows there is content to show at this space. So the user doesn't need to do anything in particular to find your stuff. It is simply available when they are at the right spot and using the app. So I think this is another really fascinating way to augment the reality of sightseeing and tourism, or even local history classes in high school or college, to bring the resources in the library together with the real world. The app is LAR. There, I put it. Oops, sorry. I'm in the wrong chat. Bear with me a second. LAR is the name of the software, and again, it's just an example of this kind of tool. And of course, this is something that is suddenly vastly more familiar to all of us than it was just a few weeks ago. Virtual meeting spaces. This is a pretty good virtual meeting space. It works decently. But it's a lot of 2D images where we're not really interacting in a way that is particularly exciting. Most of it right now is through chat because there's 180 of you, and having all of us talking aloud would be a challenge. But as we move forward, and I think this is something that's going to be, this is an emerging or re-emerging. Anybody recognize the picture or the theme of the picture? Yes, indeed, it is Second Life. Sam Jack wins the prize for being the fastest typist. And it is, this was 10 to 15 years ago, going to be the next big thing in the way we all lived our lives. Where everybody creates an avatar and gets spaces in this virtual world, and with the relatively early technologies available and very expensive technologies often, could navigate the 3D spaces. Now, I'm not sure that any of us wants to show up in a department meeting with the set of avatars that are currently being displayed on this screenshot. But it is certainly this kind of presentation, even using just Zoom, a 2D representation, or Blue Jeans, or Hangouts, or whatever tools you use the most. It is, I think, something that is going to be becoming more and more common, and even without the continuation of COVID-19 and social distancing. It is, if you kind of let your mind go free a little bit, think about the possibilities as a service point for the library. Even if the price of the technologies to embed yourself into a virtual world or be a participant in the virtual world remain high, libraries could offer meeting spaces for the virtual world that might lead to ability for someone to take a job interview that they couldn't travel to within the library, or even distant groups, much like we are, a very geographically distributed group, to meet together, but with something more than all of us talking at our computers or talking at our tablets or smartphones, or listening to a presentation through a smartphone. I think it's going to be a very, very long time before this feels real to any of us. But I think that this is likely to be coming, and I think that smart libraries will be staying ahead of this curve and attempting to provide access points to this kind of space to their patrons as a service, much as we're providing makerspaces and 3D printing workspaces today. At the same time, this sort of venue is going to require a tremendous amount of development of new norms, of how we all operate. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the chat while talking, which is a dangerous thing to do. Thank you, Dana, for pointing out that that layout got changed into something called Blipar. Last time I looked and updated the slides, that was not the case. But that is, so thank you very much for the clarification. So it's Blipar, B-L-I-P-P-A-R, as noted in the chat. So as we think about expanding our libraries to take better advantage and more advantage of augmented and increasingly virtual reality services, what are some of the things that we ought to be thinking about? Well, there are a lot of very practical considerations that we ought to consider. The first, of course, is budget. So there's a question to me about advice for protecting privacy in the virtual meeting spaces. I'm going to touch on that a bit, but if I don't touch on it enough, please come back at the end for the question and answer session. The budget is obviously something. This is technology, like any technology. There's both the getting started cost, buying the equipment the first time, spending probably resources on getting staff trained to use and teach the technologies. But because it is technology, there's probably an ongoing cost as well. The stuff that's cutting edge today will be not so cutting edge in the near future. And so you have to consider that it's like virtually anything else, if you'll excuse the pun, that has a power plug at this point. It is an ongoing investment and a recurring investment down the road. Now, like most things with technology, what you get for the same amount of money improves over time. And at some point, I think we will reach a plateau where the technology stops advancing at the speed that it is now, and comes to something of a plateau. But that is something to consider. Simple Google Cardboard headsets, you can buy them. You just buy the little plastic holder for a phone for $5 or $10 for kind of a well-made plastic one through online retailers. Cardboard is cheaper. But if you're getting into headsets themselves, you're talking in the $500 to $1,500 range for the Oculus Rift or the Vive or the HoloLens. But you also need a computer to connect that to, which is, because it's graphics intensive and computational intensive, is probably not your run-of-the-mill, your low-end computer. So there's a whole network of things. You need to think about space. And if you're providing true 3D virtual reality experiences through where the user's movements in space are replicated in the virtual space, you need to have the user have enough physical space around them so that they can walk safely. And that may be not a huge amount of area, but you might need 8 by 8 or a 10 by 10 space that you can be in, and allow the user to walk somewhat freely within that space, so they can move within that virtual environment. Most goggles and most headsets are still wired, and so you need to think about a tether. A number of places are getting very long cabling and suspending it from the ceiling with enough play so that a user could move in the whole diameter without having their head jerk backwards when they reach the end of their tether. But that keeps you from tripping over the cord while you're walking and not paying attention to your real world physical space. You of course need training, both of the library staff who provide the service and teach it, but also library users who may not have any experience in this space at all. Security, and I'm thinking there's a couple of avenues here. First is the physical security of the devices. You probably want to check them out. You want to keep them locked up, much like you do with laptops if you rent those, or any other device that is relatively expensive and relatively portable. But you also want to think about the kind of the physical and emotional security of the users who are experiencing the 3D world. These can be, virtual reality experiences can be very real. And so you want to make sure that you are, that you and your users all understand that the thing that you are opting to experience may in some way, may provide you with things you didn't realize would disturb you. You know, if even with canned programs, you may discover that someone has latent arachnophobia, and a spider documentary may not be the best thing for them to observe when it is so real and so much in front of them. Staying up to date, again, it's technology, both the software, the hardware, those all are a constantly moving target right now. And so to stay current and to stay relevant, you may need to think about longer term budget planning than in other cases. And then I come back to the motion sickness question. There is a subset of the world on which I fit in that makes it, you know, makes virtual reality experiences, triggers motion sickness in people. And that hasn't been completely solved yet. I think, you know, all of the vendors want to sell to 100% of the population, not 90 or 93% or whatever that minority is. But that is something to be aware of, that people may not realize they're going to get motion sick until they experience it and may find they're motion sick. So it is something to be aware of. I mean, taking off the headset is a very easy thing to do. It's very quick. And in my case anyway, it's very much akin to getting out of the moving vehicle. It solves, you know, it improves things. But again, that's just something that it may not be for all people right now. I also want to touch on social considerations of augmented and virtual and mixed reality. There is so much in this that is new, that it is very, you know, we're all trying to figure this out. There's a question in the chat about you know, protecting privacy in the virtual meeting space with Zoom, for example, or other tools. How do you keep people from crashing your party? How do you keep people from intentionally, who even are supposed to be there, from intentionally or accidentally sharing content or sharing stuff that is not appropriate for the audience? I mean, some of that is common sense, and some of that is that no matter what venue you're in, there may well be people who decide that it's amusing to interrupt the flow of things, to go against the norms or the mores of the group in which they're in, or are just jerks. And how we deal with that in the virtual space, I don't have any quick answers for that. We have to figure out how that works. We have to decide. We're pretty good in public spaces. In, you know, an in-person session, there's a lot of crowd pressure on someone who is acting well out of the norms of that group. And you can ask someone to leave. In the virtual spaces, if you're all in it together, you can, you know, the person who's running the show, so to speak, the admin, can bump people out. But the damage may have already been done, and depending on who is participating, the damage may be significant in some cases. Again, there aren't any easy answers. I don't think that we have the answers to this, but it is something that as a society and as a group of well-intentioned people, we librarians and technology providers are going to need to come up with ground rules and going to come up with common sense ways to keep some control over the services that we are offering to our user groups, whether that is in a public library or an academic library. The ground rules may be slightly different, but they all need to exist. One of the things that I am most concerned about is the opportunities this provides to exacerbate the digital divide that is already here. You know, as those of us with children in public schools during this, all the school closures around the coronavirus know, school districts are trying colleges and universities for that matter, are trying very hard to accommodate students who have a vast range of technology availability, internet access across a huge both geographic and economic landscape. These tools aren't cheap, and they are things that some people may be able to take advantage of in their houses. Others may rely on public libraries or academic libraries or other resources to use, and others may not even have those opportunities available to them. How we address that is a critical question. And again, I don't think there are any easy answers, much as there are no easy answers for any of the issues of the digital divide. But it is something that I think our general service ethic and our general desire to provide equal service to all comers as librarians will put us in a good space to help answer the questions. We still need to figure out how to implement those answers, but it is something that I think we should all be greatly concerned with and thinking about as we develop our programming. Common sense, if that is still a thing, is a great guide. I think that, you know, a lot of things in the virtual world do have analogs in our real world. We just have to figure out how to make them apply, make them stick, and make them and enforce them where that is necessary. I do want to touch on just a very brief overview of legal considerations that libraries might need to think about. And again, I am not a lawyer, and I'm only raising these concerns as talking points. But when we think about intellectual property in the virtual space, I mean, copyright law is copyright law, trademark law is trademark law, but how things are actually applied when it comes to building things in a virtual space with 3D modeling, it's how this actually works is still completely up in the air from a legal perspective. There simply hasn't been enough time for enough content owners or copyright holders to discover and get upset and complain about concerns, and for the courts to figure that out and for the laws to catch up. So as you are offering your virtual reality spaces to your users, you might want to think about how you frame the ground rules for what is allowed and what is not. And in terms of borrowing, making use of commercial, available 3D objects, some might be in the public domain because someone has generously made them available through a Creative Commons license. Others may not be. What is the library's role in enforcing that, if any, in providing rules, guidelines, if any? Things that you should decide before someone raises the question in a particular case. There are, of course, parallels in 3D world to the 2D world, but it is not quite the same thing. And I suspect that it will be many years before we have a firm legal understanding of what is legit and what is not from that purely legal perspective. Again, questions of who owns rights to your digital avatar, your digital creations. If you create it using a Facebook product like Oculus Rift, do you, the individual, own your avatar? Does Facebook own your avatar? Questions that I probably have kind of clicked through license answers right now, but may not have actually settled legal answers right now. What can you include in your virtual space? If you are building a replica, you have a collective project in your library to build a replica of the Student Union or of Main Street, are you allowed to use the logos of the businesses that exist in that space in your virtual 3D world, or the names? I don't know. How real is too real? And then if the library starts collecting and making these 3D objects available to others, and the library is suddenly a publisher of these worlds, does that change anything for the library? Again, I don't know that it does or doesn't, but the library ought to, each library ought to think about what this could mean for itself as it makes these things available. So I wanted to, as I wrap up and leave some time for questions, is this virtual world dystopian or utopian? We've seen examples in films and in stories and in novels about where virtual reality is used for great things or awful things. I think that all highlights that we as a species are really good at taking technology to extremes. The thing that I want to point out is that anything that we do in the real world is going to happen in the virtual world. And that could be good and that could be bad. Individuals will go off and do things in the virtual world that mirror all of the great and wonderful things we do here in the real world, and all of the things that we prefer they didn't do in the real world. And if you think about it, if you kind of extend the challenges you might have with public computer workstations and how library users take advantage of internet access and unfiltered network access in the physical world in your library, just imagine that that is going to happen in the real world, in the virtual world, and think about what you can do to manage and control that. I think that is simply the way people are wired. They will take advantage of an opportunity to explore and to learn, and take advantage of high bandwidth internet access where they can. I don't think that it is necessarily either one. It could be both. It could be neither. I think it is simply the way we are going. This is our virtual future. We are going to be moving so much more of what we do, even once we're back to working together in more normal ways. So much more will be virtual. And I want to just conclude that with this last slide, that extended reality is already here, but not evenly distributed, with apologies to William Gibson for butchering his quote for the 10-zillionth time. It is the reality that we have. It is becoming integrated in our lives, in our services, and in our users' expectations. There's a huge amount that we have to figure out, but there's also vast opportunities for us to expand and enrich the library's presence, both in the services we offer within libraries, as well as in the services that the library can offer out in the real world. So with that, I will wrap up. I have about 10 minutes left for questions. I am sure there are tons that have flashed by the Zoom, the chat, and I'm sorry I have not tracked on them as I'm talking, or all of them, but I'm open to continuing the conversation. So Sam asks, what do you think of what Fortnite is doing with virtual concerts? I think it's quite interesting. I have not taken part in them. My kids have both passed through the Fortnite phase and so are no longer living there. I think it's really, particularly right now, it's a very interesting look at what I've read about it, but I haven't experienced it. Have others taken part in a concert? What do you think? Or if there are other questions. Thank you, Sam, for posting the video link. Anna Shapansky has asked, notes that our library got a VR headset, discovered that it is not recommended for children under 16. I have seen a variety of advice on using virtual reality headsets with various age groups. Um, I think you'd have to, we'd each have to do our research. I think there's concern about extended use, much like with any sort of technology, and young ages. I don't think that, again, my own personal take on it, spending 15 or 20 minutes in a virtual reality world at age 10 is probably not going to break anything. Spending hours may not be quite as good. but but yeah, so I think, I mean, take those warnings. I'm sure they are certainly valid and useful, but I think it would require, thinking about it more clearly, what the reasons for the recommendation are, as well as if it is a duration of use as well as fact of use. Yeah, it is interesting, Laurie, about some libraries are finding that their most popular audience for VR programming is older adults. Um, that I could see that. It might be that it's more novel for older adults, or perhaps more, it feels more practical. Um, so, and Deanna Brown notes, I've heard libraries taking VR headsets to retirement communities for virtual vacations, which is also, I think, a really a great way to put libraries, or give that experience to people, as well as exposing folks who may not have opportunities to play with the latest and greatest technology that their grandkids are using, or talking about, um, uh, to try it out. Um, Anastasia asks, what will happen to the books? What do you mean? I don't think that virtual reality is going to supplant books any more than anything else that we've thrown into libraries in the last uh, 10 years. We'll get rid of books. But do you have something something specific in mind? Uh, uh, Christopher Davis asked about sanitizing devices. Yes, well, yes, I think that is, I should have mentioned that earlier. I think it is, well, especially now, but even in whatever passed for normal times before now, um, making sure that you have wipes to wipe down all the parts that touch a person, the headset, the frame, the straps, is very, very wise. If even without the pandemic at play, just the ick factor. I've heard librarians, or I've heard other people wonder, not just librarians, if exchanging headsets is a way to transfer lice. I have no idea if lice like headset cable, the headset band or not, but conceivably, I think you definitely want to keep things clean between uses. Um, I think that would be strongly advised. Whether that has to be something a staff person does, or you just provide the cleaning materials for each user to clean it before they start. Um, but I think that's a very wise choice. And Danielle adds there are paper masks for VR headsets, disposable masks, which is probably also something to look into. And I should say that there are many more examples in the book available at fine libraries throughout the world, and as an ebook as well. So we are just about out of time. I would be happy to answer any other questions if you contact me by email. I've stopped sharing the slides, but it's Varnum, my last name, at umich.edu. Feel free to get in touch. And I thank you very much for your time this afternoon and for your attention and your questions. I hope everyone enjoys their weekends.